So I imagine that some of you say, well, LSX looks like it's pretty cool, and I've seen some good examples of stuff coming out of it, but I hear all this talk of expressions, and I hear all this talk about math and the complexity of programming shows, and that's kind of a turnoff. So I want to clear the air straight away. Most of my shows don't have any expressions in them whatsoever. So if you want to use expressions, they're very, very, very powerful, and you can do some incredible things with them, but you don't have to. So don't let that be a stumbling block in trying out LSX and thinking that it might be an interesting tool for you. So I'll talk a little bit about my show process. And if any of you guys have seen my work, you know that primarily I enjoy abstracts. And, you know, sort of when I was at formative age and saw my first planetarium laser show, you know, parts of my brain that I wasn't aware of lit up. And for a long time I've been saying, I want to do that. I want to make that light, and I want to make those patterns. And LSX is the first tool that I've found that I can use to make those patterns. And you know, I know that there are other very good laser show programs out there, and you know, I don't have anything negative to say about any of them because I don't believe in religious wars. And these are all just tools, and you use the tool that makes you light up, or you use the tool that does the job for you. In doing a show creation, usually what I do is LSX keeps frames in what's called catalog files. And catalog files are just, you know, think of folders or think of drawers of media. I like to start by taking one of the default catalog files, since there's a ton of them, and a lot of these files contain kind of early elements of shows, not quite what you would think of as geometric primitives, but very basic building blocks for shows. So I start with a piece of music, and I listen to the music for a long time, and I kind of start to visualize things that might be fun to go along with the music. So what I'll do is I'll just load a piece of music, and this is something that I have from one of my other shows. I'll take this one. And you guys have probably all seen this show. Let's pump up the volume. But I'll just, you know, load some music here. And I'll turn the volume up a little bit. Okay, so here's some music. No, I don't have anything playing, unfortunately. So I listen to that music, and I think about tempo, and I think about, you know, where are there events in the music that might be fun for something to happen on the screen. So let's kind of put something on the screen and try to make it work to the music. And you know, LSX has got the timeline editor like pretty much any program you've played with. Like if you cut video, think of Final Cut, or think of whatever. If you do music, or if you edit audio, you know, it's all about timeline. So you start with you know, an object, or you start with an event, and then you add an effector, and then you have time, and you try to sync that all to the music that's going on. So, you know, and there's lots of ways to do this. What I like to do is I like to embed everything within a loop. And the only reason I like to do that is because it keeps my timeline a little bit cleaner. You don't have to do it. None of my early shows did it, and if you look at my old timelines, it's like, you know, events all willy-nilly, and it becomes very, very confusing, because if I want to go in and edit something, I'm like, okay, is that an object, or is that a transformation, or is that a color, or is that a movement? So, you know, I'm clicking through stacks and stacks of effects, and it's just this kind of a mess. So by putting things in a loop, you can encapsulate things, which makes it very easy to move them around on the timeline. It makes it really easy to cut and paste them. And it makes it easy to edit them, because you click on one thing and then you get a drop down of everything that's affecting that one thing. So, you know, your mileage may vary, but it's an approach that I like to do. So what I've done is I've added an effect loop, or a loop to the timeline. So I'm going to tell LSX to repeat the playing of this loop over and over again. And you can see from the slider that we're repeating, but there's nothing there. So let's add something. I'm going to turn it down a little bit. Let's make an abstract. And there's a lot of ways to make an abstract. There's kind of two traditional ways with LSX, and one is by starting with the seed, which could be data from a frame. It could be a single point, it could be a shape, it could be an Ilda frame, or it could be something from the LaserShow editor. I'm just going to start from, I'm just going to start from a basic shape. So when you have an SFX or a loop on the timeline and you click on it, you get what's basically a little timeline, and that is a timeline that is unique to that loop. It's all the events that will be encompassed by that loop. So for event 0, let's grab a frame, and there's a star, and this is just a star that was in the catalog file. It's just, you know, a basic frame. So one of the things that a feature that LSX has, which is really nice, is the ability to clone things. And it's sort of like a sample and hold, but it allows you to take an object or take an animation and copy itself multiple times, and then you can add effects to copies, or you can add effects to the cloned images or the cloned data. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a couple clones of this object by creating a rotate Z effect, and I'm going to clone this object on the Z axis. So I'm creating a rotate Z effect, and I'm going to tell it that we're an expression. Our expression is loop. So now when we come up here to our duplicate count, this affects the number of items that are looped or cloned. So let's add a couple. So already we've got something that's kind of interesting. So now we can take these objects and we can fly them apart and we can fly them together. So this is an event called Premove Y, and LSX has pre-events and post-events. Post-events happen after everything else, and pre-events happen before everything else. So what we're doing is, with this expression, or with this event, we're moving this single object and then we're duplicating it. So the duplicates move in sequence, but not all at once. And that allows us to do some really fun things. So let's speed this up a little bit, and let's change the size of the motion just so it's a little bit smaller and fits on the projection zone a little bit easier. In fact, we can even shrink this basic object by coming over here and adding a size requester. Okay, so now that we've got this going on, what we can do is we can start adding rotation. And if we do that and start doing a little bit of rotation, you know, we pretty quickly get something going that is kind of a fun abstract. You know, it's super quick and super easy. No, it's a 15-second abstract. But this is kind of the key to making interesting things with LSX. And now we can start adding post events. And one of my favorite is colors. And we can even add intensity modulation events. So now, you know, very, very quickly and very, very easily, we get an abstract. No math, no expressions, but, you know, a really fun abstract. And, you know, again, we can add some more events on this. Let's add a roll rotation, so the entire thing starts to rotate on the Z-axis. So, and yeah, you'll actually see this in a lot of my shows because it's a quick and easy abstract to do, and it looks nice. Now, one of the things that's also kind of nice about LSX is you can assign things to surfaces. And if you've ever worked with a structured drawing program or something like Photoshop, you know there are layers. And layers can include other layers, or layers can be holes and reveal things behind them. And LSX does that, and does that very, very well. So let's add some layers. And we can do this in a new event, or we can do this in the same event. In this case, I'm going to do a new event just to keep things kind of simple. So I'm going to add another loop. And let's just grab some more frame data, another frame. Here's a square. And I'll shrink this a little bit. Okay, so now we have kind of a mess that's not very interesting to look at. But we can take this square that I just made and we can put it on another surface. And now the square is in front. But also LSX has this really nice invert feature. So we can actually trap things within other things. And one of the very powerful things that we can do with this is we can use it to mask things, to only show parts of something. So let's set up a little animation. Oops. Actually, what I wanted to do was X. Okay. So let's make this square move back and forth fairly fast. And so you can see we're only revealing what's behind it. But LSX will still treat this as a masking object, even if it's invisible. So in a lot of my shows, you see things revealed and disappear, like video transitions.
Exactly.
And this is exactly what I'm using. You know, I have two sequences next to each other, and then I just do a transition like this. And so things will wipe off screen, or things will wipe on screen. And it could not be simpler, and it's really kind of fun. And also, one of the things that's very powerful is if you do this with size, you can make things kind of appear and disappear in an interesting way. So let's speed this up a little bit so we can kind of get an idea of what's happening. So now my square is shrinking and growing, and when the square is too small to see, you know, the object totally disappears. So it's just kind of a fun way to get stuff off and on the screen. So a lot of traditional laser shows, you know, you have an object that appears from center point, grows, does a rotation transform, and then shrinks back to center point. You see this over and over and over again, and it's just not very dynamic, and it's not very interesting. So if you could do, you know, some transforms like this, it gets a little more dynamic. And what's fun is even abstracts can appear and disappear and reveal things behind them. So I can set up an abstract and have an abstract open to show another abstract playing behind it. And I do that in some of my shows. And I can show you guys that, or you know, we can do some other things. So we've got this going on, and one of the common elements in my shows is I like to have circles of dots that kind of come in and then come back out. And you know, you could do it the traditional way of getting into a frame editor and drawing a circle of points and, you know, hoping that you've got everything lined up and your spacing is nice and whatever. But I hate doing things like that. And it's sort of, my opinion is, I'm the human, this should do the work and not me. So there's actually a really, really super easy way of doing this. So let's create another event. And let's start with just a simple point. And I imagine most of these cat files have, you know, basic things like points. And what we can do is we can do the same rotation effect where we clone something and duplicate it on the z-axis. And let's make a couple clones. And now if we use Premove, what we can do is we can affect the spacing between the points. So let's make this a static value. Okay, so now let's also put this on another surface. So now these points are actually in front of everything else. So they're not affected by that square that's shrinking and growing. But 3 points is kind of boring. So by creating duplicates, you know, we can create more points, and they're all spaced perfectly. They're all based on one single point. You know, LSX is handling the positioning and all that automatically, and I didn't have to draw anything, which is nice because I'm fundamentally a lazy person. So, and then we can change the size of the circle by changing the Premove requester, but we can also do really fun things like say -0.5 and 1. So now we can actually make these things grow and shrink based on the control here. So nice and easy. We can also put rotations on them. We can put color effects on these points now. So we can change color based on distance, or number, or expression, or just about anything within LSX. So you know, it's very easy to get stuff quickly. That's kind of interesting to look at. And let's make this a little bit smaller because I think we're flying off the screen. Okay. And I have this moving. You can see my screen. I don't know why. I need to point here. You can see that I'm moving these things in a sine wave, and it's just kind of a nice, gentle, sort of organic motion. But there's all kinds of defined waveforms here. You know, there's square waves, there's triangle waves, and you can see triangle waves, they're bouncing instead of slowing down as they get to the end of the event and then speeding back up. So it's not a spline, it's a triangle. I actually mostly do things with sine and cosine waves just because I like things to flow a little bit, and I think that does a nicer job of flowing than something that's doing a hard bounce. So let's put a little rotation on that, and then, you know, presto, you have a Swami abstract. Just like super easy, couldn't be faster. And in fact, that's one I've used in my shows before. So you now know this. So if you don't want to use pre-made frames, you can take data from the LaserShow editor and you can clone that as well. So let's just do something really nice and simple. I'm going to delete this star frame, and then I'm going to add a LaserShow effect. Okay. And what this does is this will take real-time data from the LaserShow editor and put it into a cat file. So it's a live effect. It's not static. So I'm just getting, this is outputting the frame 195, so I'm setting it up to take that data. So let's do that. Okay, so now we're taking data from the LaserShow editor and we're taking that data, putting it into a cat file, and then using that data, cloning it a couple of times, and then putting it out here. So if we open an effect, you can see suddenly we start getting some really interesting. So turn off this, just to simplify things a little bit. And I'm just adding some points until we hit a nice harmonic. And that's pretty nice. So let's get this square out here so you can actually see what's going on. So, you know, very quickly and easily, we can get some really unique abstracts. And we can get some stuff that resembles old Knobbox and old planetarium analog abstracts very, very easily. That's not to say that I don't have a really fond heart for the old stuff, because I do. But you know, this is a really nice way to generate stuff that has that sort of look and feel very, very easily. And you know, by changing the number of duplicates, we can make stuff that's kind of got some interesting symmetries to it. And the point, of course, is, you know, you find a shape, and then you hunt for some stability, and it's kind of hard to do when I'm not looking at the projection. But that's pretty good. And of course, so this is frame data, so you can perform any sort of transform on it that you would like a normal frame. You know, you can do X, Y, and Z rotations, you can do color effects, you can do all kinds of things to this. Even though this is live data coming out of the LaserShow editor, it's kind of like a sampling whole. So you take this stuff, you confect it, and clone it, and put it back out there. And this really is kind of what I use for probably 90% of my work, is starting with these very basic shapes, or starting with a fun squiggly line from the LaserShow editor, and then duplicating it a couple of times, and then adding rotational and scale transforms on it, and then, you know, finding some interesting color effect to add to it, or some interesting intensity effect to add to it, and then layering it. And you know, it's really simple, and I know that if you look at the stuff, or people have been talking on PL, like, you know, what weird math is Swami using to draw these shapes? Well, I'm cheating, because this pleases me, and this is super easy, and you guys can do this, you know, underwater with your eyes closed. It's just really, really simple. So I can load up a show, I guess, and talk a little bit about. Sorry?
How'd you do the space bubbles?
Oh.
This secret sauce.
Let me see if I have that on this machine. I'm not positive that I do. Let's find out. The space bubbles, those were circles with some color effect applied to them, and it was cloned about 10 times, and then they were following a sine wave with a little bit of other stuff to kind of change their position, but it was mostly following a sine wave. And I did that, you know, there's this guy, Colored Mirror Ball, CMB.
Yeah, yes.
I did that mostly to annoy him, because he is the man when it comes to expressions. Just like, there's something in his brain that makes him beyond human. So we sit in the IRC chat room and throw stuff back and forth, and you know, I'll show him an abstract, and an hour later he'll just have some crazy expression that, like Andrew said, is a video game, or like reflects something on the surface of water and has real-time 3D lighting on it, or you know. So there's your space bubbles. So there's actually two animations going on here. There's these bubbles that are moving on the z-axis with some color change based on the position. And there's also a small animation of these dots rotating in the background, just to kind of add to the complexity a little bit. This actually is expression based, and oops. There's the expression. And that's on the Y event, the Premove Y. And then, you know, I'm doing the same thing with some scale, some size, and with intensity, so stuff fades in intensity a little bit as it appears to recede. And then, you know, just some lighting effects, so I can show it to you without the, you know, so there's the effect with no lighting going on. But then I just added a little bit of coloration based on the point number and a little bit of intensity based on the sign. And it became a pretty convincing illusion of bubbles. One of the features that Andrew added a while back, which I think is a really, really compelling feature that nobody has used other than me, which really, really surprises me, is a little routine that draws shapes for you. So you can feed it a shape, and then you can say, you can feed it a shape, and then you can feed it this animation event, and it will unwind and draw the shape for you. And I can show you that here. I really expecting the show to be playing.
Who's playing in that?
Oh, I had the sound turned down, and I had the preview turned off. I'm sorry. Now, so I don't have here's the event that I'm referring to, and I think it's a really, really beautiful effect. And you know, there's some scanning artifacts here because I don't have LSX configured for this projector. And you know, everybody's got a different set of galvos, and everybody does things a little differently. So I spent a little bit of time in the hall this afternoon tuning my shows, optimizing my shows for Dave's scanning system. So this stuff looks a little weird on other Dave's scanning system. But when I discovered this effect, you know, I kind of pinged Dr. Lala and said, "This is really cool." And, I'm quite honestly a little surprised that people aren't using it because it's a really unique effect, and I've never seen it before. And one of the things that is really, really nice about LSX, and I'm not really going to demonstrate it because it's kind of not something that's it's kind of more important to talk about it than to demonstrate it, is LSX is multi-threaded in some really nice ways. I mean, I can run this show, and I can say, what is this element that I'm currently playing? So you know, we were just looking at something that had some scanning artifacts because, like I said, I hadn't configured this for this projector. So I can take a look at this and I can say, oh, this is an abstract. So I have an abstract scanning parameter here. So while the show is playing, I can go over to the scanning parameter control panel, and I can actually make changes. Sorry. So while the show is playing, you know, I can come over here and I can affect the scanning parameters until the show is displaying properly while the show is still running. So, you know, if I'm at a gig and something's up, I don't have to stop the show in the middle to clean up scanning artifacts. I can also, while the show is running, change the position of the show, you know, let's lock these together. I can change the size, I can change the position of the show, you know, while the show's running, which is hugely powerful. And there are many packages that don't allow you to do that, and I think that that's a feature of LSX that is really powerful, because I can't imagine doing a page show and halfway through the page show saying, oh, I need to stop, or I need to restart this because, you know, my color balance is off, or I've got scanning trails, or I'm overspilling the boundaries of my screen. So I can just go in here, open up this control panel, do all these tweaks on the fly, nobody will notice, and the show will go off without a hitch. So, you know, I think that that's a really, really strong feature. I can make that bigger again. So one of the things, you know, we were doing some kind of informal stuff earlier in the big hall. So, you know, one of the things that I've talked about, being able to hide objects behind other objects, is here. So here I've got a word, a single word, and I'm kind of, you know, putting it on the screen like a SELEM. And really all I'm doing is I have a static word, and then I have a small square that is invisible, that I have set to invert, so it's only showing the things that are behind it, which is the text, and then I'm moving that square back and forth. So that, you know, there's no weird fade-in effect that I have to do. There's no like hand animation of letter by letter. I'm just moving a square across, you know, on a simple sine wave. You know, it's so there's a square, and that square is there. So, you know, that's all I'm doing to show that text. So it's just a really simple effect that is powerful, and I think is a lot more eye-catching than, you know, sliding something across the screen, or word of text across the screen, or, you know, spinning something up from the middle of the screen like I've talked about, which is such a traditionally boring LaserShow effect. And that's, you know, that's kind of my approach to making a LaserShow, is find a song, think about what it might look like, start with some really basic elements like squares and triangles and circles, and then just start filling in pieces and going through and refining, and then thinking about transitions between sections, so the whole show flows. And, you know, the last couple of shows that I've been doing, I've been using another package from Dr. Lava, which is his LaserCam package. And LaserCam really was designed for live video to laser for things like clubs. You know, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's kind of the approach. And I decided to basically do a laser music video with it. So I went and worked with a family of Yaqui Indians that are some friends of mine, and filmed them in their studio. You know, Alex is a drum maker and a flute player, so I filmed him playing his flute, and I filmed his son playing drum, and his granddaughter dancing. And I took all that and edited it down in Final Cut until it was just a silhouette of their performance, and I synced it back to their CD, and then I fed all of that, six minutes of it, into LaserCam, and ended up with, you know, 11,000 frames or some just huge number of frames, and dropped that into LSX and synced it back up to music on the timeline, and it worked. And it rendered some transitions and some color effects between these things, and, you know, like, surprising nobody more than myself, I actually made it work, and that was really hugely satisfying to me. And, you know, I needed some support on the side. I sent you an email, and 4 hours later, you found me on IRC with a fix, and that was midnight. And that code that you shipped me solved the problem, which, you know, an amazing service, and I'm hugely grateful for that, because that was really, really nice. So I completed the video, and I showed it to them at Indian Market in Prescott 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. And I showed Louisa, who's the little girl dancing, and she watched that, and her eyes were like this big, and she looked up at me and she said, "You made us into rock stars." And I'm just like, "Yeah, honey." And you know, it just like that 100 hours suddenly became worth it. It was so nice to see that expression on her face. And so this is, you know, this has been a really fun journey for me. And the PO crowd has really come through, because I've only really been doing this laser stuff for a couple of years. You know, I dabbled with lasers a long time ago. I had an Alpha Light and a Cat Weasel like 15 years ago, and it was hugely satisfying. And I just kind of, you know, eventually I burned them up and put it on the shelf and just kind of like, okay, you know, that episode of my life is done. And very recently, I kind of come back to the fold, and the PO community, which has been really, really gratifying and very sweet to me. And there's a number of people here who have kind of banded together and enabled me to be here this weekend. So, you know, thank you to Brad and David and other people who have contributed financially and spiritually to get me here, because this is proving to be a really fun and really entertaining family. I love the fact that we all play nice, and everybody here this weekend is to help each other and to show off what they're doing and to learn from other people, and that just makes it really, really gratifying for me. It's clearly a community that I want to be part of for a really long time, because this is fun and this is fun. So I'll take some questions, or I'll go have some more pizza.
I want to thank you all for playing. It's really nice to see all of this and get a peek behind the curtain.
Well, you know, you're kind of an enabler too.
Well,
Because, you know, I bought a Lumia kit
I remember.
from David, which turned out to be one of the kits that you were making.
Yeah.
And that was like, what, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
You know, I bought a 405 nanometer diode. I had this idea, which was, I want to be the first person to make glow-in-the-dark Lumia. So I bought one of those 405 nanometer diodes. I bought a FlexMod from you. I bought one of your Lumia kits. I painted a 4x4 chunk of the wall in my garage in glow paint and made a glow-in-the-dark Lumia. And I highly recommend doing it, because it is fantastically cool.
About that. Did you put anything up on the forum?
I did.
Did you?
Did.
Okay.
And then I took it to a party a month later, and I built this giant 6x8 screen that I covered in micro glass beads and phosphor powder that I bought from United Nuclear, and made this giant UV Lumia screen, which was just a really kind of a fun introduction of Chris back into the world of lasers. And, you know, since then I built that Lumia egg beater, and then I decided, you know, so that's been a whole lot of fun. And, you know, tomorrow I'll show an hour of my pretty light, along with some of the stuff that Dave made and some of the stuff that Dr. Robin made, and I think that'll be really fun. So I hope you guys come and check it out. And, sorry I talked a lot, but if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be happy to answer them.